Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. In many of my videos, I spoke about the expansionism, colonial invasion, and how the West massacred men, women, and children, the indigenous in Australia, in America, in Africa. They've done it in India. In a combined murder, millions were massacred. You can blame this on colonialism. You can even say Christianity had its claws in here too, because when those lands were invaded, the Christians moved their churches to those lands. They didn't say, oh no, Jesus forbids this. This land was invaded falsely and under a demonic regime. Therefore, we're not going to touch that land. No, the Christian preachers, the priests, the bishops, the ministers, they went there and they built their churches. They said that this is good for us. This is good about evangelizing the rest of the world. So, yes, it has a Christian touch to it, just as the Crusades did. It has a secular, liberal claw in it too. They also have to be blamed for this because, as you know, they believe in separation between church and state, and they set up their governments here with a separation in church and state. So yes, when they invaded under colonialism. And of course, the explanation is yes, I don't have a problem with expansionism, because a lot of the critics say, oh, you Muslims, what about your history? What about the Ottoman Empire? You guys believed in expansionism. You invaded this country and that country. Yes, we did. And I don't have a problem with expansionism. If you believe your ideals are true, you expand it. But see, I'm fair with that because at least I admit and I acknowledge that. But a lot of secular liberalists, they can't admit that they believe in expansionism. They believe in human rights values, and their version of human rights should apply to everyone. So if there is a country that doesn't believe in the Western moral values and human rights, that country should be defeated. Their tyranny should be defeated, and they should accept our secular liberal ideas, our ideas about humanism, about human rights. So that's why they went and invaded Afghanistan, right? The biggest lie in history, one of the biggest lies, if not one of the greatest lies in history, is when the colonialists say, or the Westerners, today's modern Westerners say, oh, invasions used to happen 100 years ago. The colonialist invasions ended 100 years ago. We don't do that anymore. We don't believe in colonial style invasion of other countries. That happened hundreds years ago, right? We don't do that anymore. And this is the biggest lie, because they are still, till today, invading their ideas, pushing the colonial white supremacy agenda, trying to dictate to the world, trying to control the world. And we've seen them do that in Afghanistan. We've seen them do that in Middle East. They don't like Saddam Hussein, or they want to access natural resources of the Middle East. So they go and invade it once every few years, and they go and take the oil from that country. And some people think that invasion means you literally take that country for yourself. You go and inhabit it. No, but that doesn't mean invasion. Invasion could be, you could go there, set up your own secular liberal governments, and then coerce them to be like you, that is also part of invasion. For instance, the Muslims don't need to invade Australia. They don't need to come here. They don't need to come to Australia, right? If they can control the government and say you need to now convert to Sharia law, the Muslims don't have to move here. That it means they've basically invaded. Their ideology has come here. It's invaded by force. And if Australians don't accept it, then we're going to come and slaughter them here. See? Same thing. So if America doesn't have to invade, as in go and take the land for itself, it can control the natural resources from America. It can dictate who is in power. This is all part of invasion. And we've seen them do this in Afghanistan. Although they've sent military forces there, they tried to change the constitution from Islamic rule. They try to change it to secular Western morals, values, ethics, human rights values. And they tried to change the culture of that land from one that is Islamic to one that is more Western and progressive, as they say. Even today, if you look at Iran, for example, here, look at all the American military bases surrounding Iran. Look at this. Look how many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. There's close to about 35, 36 military bases, American military bases surrounding Iran. Why is there over 36 military bases surrounding Iran if apparently the colonial or the Western invasions ended over 100 or 200 years ago? How? Explain that to me. Explain how it ended. And by the way, America has 950 bases worldwide. 950. If China or an Arab country surrounded any Western country with this many military bases, what would happen? All hell would break loose. All hell would break loose. They'll say this is invasion. They'll say this is occupation. How dare we have over 35, 36 Arab or Chinese military bases surrounding our country, right? But how does America get away with this? And how does the West close their eyes? How are they so hypocritical when it comes to talking about Islamization or Muslims trying to take over or this sort of Islamic dictatorship? Or how they even have the audacity to say that invasion and occupation ended 100 to 200 years ago. Absolute hypocrisy. And we made a video before that the West supports, they always call it, the Americans, for instance, they'd say it is our national interest. So that's why they're supporting Israel. They say we stand with Israel because Israel is an extension of white supremacy into the Middle East. That's why Benjamin Netanyahu talks about completely annihilating, destroying Gaza, which is he's going to want that for himself. And he even talks about, shows a map to the United Nations. He's speaking about advancing beyond the Jordan River. And they're going to keep going. Because their aim, the American agenda is, America doesn't have a country. They don't have a Christian dominant nation within the Middle East. So they're using Israel, and through Israel, doing deals through Israel, they're going to constantly control the Middle East. And they're going to obviously continue to exploit the natural resources of the Middle East. So they'll continue through Yemen, through Jordan. They'll go and attack Iran to take the natural resources. Iran has one of the, after Russia's got a large gas and oil. And through the Gulf, they have these natural resources, these great reserves. And of course, they'll justify that war by saying Iran is supporting Hamas, therefore we need to now go and destroy Iran. That will be the justification. Like in any of their proxy wars, Saddam Hussein has got nuclear warheads. Saddam Hussein's got, the plans to have these weapons of mass destruction. And he never had these weapons of mass destruction. But again, it was their way of making excuses to the international community to get the international community to believe in a lie. Because when you get them to believe in a lie, just as what Israel did with the 40 decapitated babies, which till today, Israel is very good at showing pictures to the world. Very good. But for some reason, they're not showing the 40 decapitated babies' heads. But this was posted in New York, in the New York Times. And it was a justification. We need to now go and completely destroy Gaza, killing over 10,000 people, and the numbers are climbing, half of which are children. And so this is the method, the games they will play, and they continue to do this. We have to go after the boogeyman, but under the table, they're taking the natural resources, because it is always about greed. There's always some monetary benefit from going to war, right? And the reason why they're not attacking Saudi Arabia is because Saudi Arabia, gives these guys, oil and the petrol and the oil that they need, and it gives it at a good price. But I'll tell you right now that when the oil runs out of, because America gets they steal a lot of oil from northern Syria. When the oil runs out from there, because they get a lot of free oil, the Americans, when the oil starts running out, the reserves start running out there, then they'll start creating this boogeyman to then go after Saudi Arabia, and then they'll say Saudi Arabia is funding terrorism or funding Hamas or whatever, and then they'll start attacking Saudi Arabia, and then they'll go to war with Saudi Arabia, and of course the repetition will continue. And if you look at Ukraine is, between Russia and Ukraine, you see Russia is doing the same thing. Why does Russia want Ukraine back? Why are these Christians killing other Christians? They're both Christians. Majority of them are Orthodox Christians on both sides. Why are they killing each other? Well, it's because Russia wants the natural resources. It wants to control the Black Sea. And so it wants to control that, and because it's got shipping channels and a lot of the trade. When you have control of the ports, it's very beneficial to your economy. So they want to control all of that. And they want to be able to search for oil and gas in those areas, especially in the Black Sea, which is, even Turkey, even the Turkish ships looking for oil in their own region. So it has gas, it can have oil, but it can have a high percentage of gas. So again, like I said, it all comes down to finding the natural resources, which is gold for them. It will help their economy, it will help it grow. And so most of these wars have to do with monetary interests, economic interests. So getting back on topic, such as we spoke about how the West committed genocide. It started killing. And of course, the difference is, yes, in Islam, we believe in expansionism, but the difference is we don't believe in the black slave trade, the way they dealt with the slaves. And slavery in Islam is completely different. When you read and see the rights of captured slaves in war and so forth, it is completely different than the colonialist idea of slaves. And on top of that, and by the way, you can listen to lectures from Yasser Qadi, who speaks about this. I can put a hyperlink a hyperlink below this here, and you can see the rights of slaves in Islam compared to Christianity and colonialism. And of course, in Islam, you can't kill women and children. This only includes war combatants, not women and children. That's something that the colonialists and those who believe in today's Western invasions do not really believe in. And we've seen what they're doing in Israel, how they're supporting the killing of children and women, saying this is all part of collateral damage, because they like to nicely word it as collateral damage. So the term massacre is now changed into collateral damage. They think by changing the name massacring children and women, because they know that their bombs are dropping on women and children, and it's not differentiating between men or war combatants. And they use the excuse of Hamas is using human shields. And a lovely lady, I forgot her name, she gave a beautiful example. She said, if a man has taken a woman and a child hostage and puts a gun to their head, and you have the police drawing out their guns and saying, drop your weapon, and he doesn't listen, and would this now give the police the right to just shoot and just indiscriminately fire 30 or 40 rounds? Knowing, and they're like, well, we don't care if the child and the lady died. Our objective was to kill that man. Would this be acceptable? And no one would say that would be acceptable, right? You do your best to negotiate. Do your utmost best to remove. Negotiate, move, get in a position where you can probably shoot him in the leg or shoot him in the chest instead of just indiscriminately throwing 100 bullets, right? So you do measures, but in this case, Israel doesn't care. It sees a building and it's like, okay, Hamas might be firing rockets from there, or Hamas might have a stockpile of weapons in there. We'll just drop a bomb, 12-story building just drops, killing majority of them are children and women. But this is their way of ethnic cleansing. And another brother, may Allah reward him, he said something really, really good. He said, would Israel use the same tactic if Hamas had stockpiles of weapons in Tel Aviv? Would Israel do the same measure by throwing a rocket to that building, knowing that there are Jewish families, that there were Jewish families and children in that building? Would they throw a rocket, completely destroying that 12-story building, killing, hundreds of Jewish families, women and children, because they believed Hamas had a stockpile of weapons in there, or there was a Hamas militant in there? They wouldn't. Instead, they'd send special forces, they'd surround the building, and they go from room to room, clearing out room to room. I mean, isn't Israel the fourth or fifth, as they brag, superpower in the world? What, they can't do special ops from going from building? Of course they can, but for them it will take long and it's inconvenient for them, right? They rather just, for them, Palestinians are animals anyway. Their children are animals. So when you consider them to be animals, you're considering them to be second-class citizens, then why go through that trouble of special ops and special force? Who cares? And this goes back to, again, the white supremacy, the white nationalism, that same mentality, colonial. We are better than them. Our blood is more precious than them. Those black people, those indigenous, they're savages, right? Who cares about their lives? What is important is our lives. And we know this, even through their rhetoric, because, in 2018, when there were protests in Gaza, 100 civilians, protesters, peaceful protesters, they got massacred. They're saying about 100, between 100 to 200. To be fair, probably around 192 people got massacred, right? Israel opened live ammunition, right? And the question is, an Israeli said to me, but they flinged rockets. Rocks. And they had Molotov cocktail bombs where, they put the bottle, they put petrol, whatever, they throw it and it just sort of explodes. And apparently, so they said, it's justified to kill 100 people. But I said to myself, really? So you couldn't use rubber bullets? No Israelis died. No soldiers died. What was the imminent threat of doing live ammunition? Live ammunition. Right? And we've seen violent protests, even if you want to say it was violent. We've seen violent protests in France. We've seen violent protests in America. I've never seen them, especially in our era, where they've opened live ammunition. The only place you're seeing live ammunition being fired is in Israel. Apparently they're the only democracy in the world and they're doing live ammunition. And if the Israelis threw stones at the IDF and their own police force and stuff like that, would the Israeli forces do live ammunition? I don't believe they would. I do not believe they would, because they consider Jewish blood to be pure, more advanced than, those Arabs. And because they believe it's more pure, they would never open live ammunition. But like I said, when you're Arab, then you're compared to animals, right? That's what the Israeli defense minister said. So if you compare to animals, then who cares if we open up live ammunition? And this is why the West doesn't care whether it's massacre. They don't care if it's genocide, because let's face the facts. Why would United Kingdom and America, Australia declare this a massacre or genocide? They're part of the genocide and the massacre. They're supplying the weapons for them to do this, because again, Israel is part of the colonial and an extension of the white colonial expansionism into the Middle East. And that's why they don't care. They'll keep lying to the media. Israel has got only the Arabs are the terrorists, and Israel has got a right to defend itself. Palestinians don't have a right to defend themselves. In the West Bank, a Israeli farmer is being handed out guns, saying by the government, by the IDF, saying, here you go, take this gun, you can defend yourself. But the same guns aren't given to the people in West Bank, where there is no Hamas there. Guns aren't provided there so those Muslim farmers can protect themselves because there are Jewish settlers. And what? Over 103 people died so far, and the numbers are climbing. Now, in 2023, and these, because the white Jewish settlers are going, this is an opportunity to kill the Muslims in the West Bank, because we can continue to take their land and their homes, which they're doing. But the world doesn't say that's a genocide or that's a massacre. But this is totally acceptable. And then what they want to do, they want to paint the Muslim history with the same brush. They're like, how can you say that, the Muslims, the Muslim expansion, you guys didn't kill women and children. What about the Armenian Genocide? They'll bring this up. Let's listen to the Armenian Genocide.
Turkey and Armenia have been disputing for more than 100 years now the events of 1915 in eastern Anatolia. Armenia claims around 1.5 million Armenians died in 1915 during mass deportations from territories now within Turkey's eastern borders. Turkey acknowledges the suffering of the Armenians, but believes that the death of the Muslims must be considered in this context too. According to Turkey, during the periods between 1912 and 1922, around 3 million people died, including Turks, Kurds, and Jews, and estimates that around 300,000 to 600,000 were Armenians.
But I also wish to say that we have to consider that Armenians also killed Turks and Kurds.
Many historians acknowledge that Armenians died, but argue it is not genocide as it is being portrayed by the Western media. Bernard Lewis, a prominent historian, said he feels the suffering of the Armenian people, but objects to the comparisons made to the Holocaust.
The Armenians want to benefit from both worlds. On the one hand, they speak with pride of their struggle against Ottoman despotism, while on the other hand, they compare their tragedy to the Jewish Holocaust. I do not accept this.
Tüm dünya şunu bilmeli. Biz arşivleri sonuna kadar açtık. Ey Ermeniler, varsa arşiviniz siz de açın. Tüm dünya, üçüncü ülkeler, varsa arşivlerinizi açın.
To understand what really happened in 1915, we need to go back. You see, the Ottoman Empire ruled for more than 600 years. Turks, Kurds, Armenians, Greeks, and Jews lived side by side in peace for centuries. The empire stretched across southeastern Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and many parts of the Arabian Peninsula.
Together, the Armenians and the Turks lived for 800 years. 800 years in which things weren't perfect, but in which they lived side by side and managed to survive.
Between 1893 and 1915, Ottoman Armenians rebelled against the Ottoman government. They joined two Armenian separatist groups, the notorious Dashnaks and Hunchaks. These two groups armed and paved the way for a Russian invasion of eastern Anatolia. Armenians started revolts in parts of eastern Anatolia in an effort to obtain autonomy in the Caucasus and eastern Anatolia. In 1914, the Russians went to war with the Turks, and the Armenians decided it was the right time to get what they wanted.
We had embraced Russia wholeheartedly, without any compunction. Without any positive basis of fact, we believed that the Tsarist government would grant us more or less broad self-government.
They thought that if they provided volunteers for the Russian army, and they supplied 4 brigades, that they would be able to rely on the Russians to set up a separate Armenia. And of course, to do that kind of thing in 1915, when the Turks were being attacked by the British and French in Gallipoli, more or less the same time, was a terrible provocation.
As the Ottoman Empire was at war on many fronts, the Russians were heavily supporting the Armenians. Now, to be clear, not every Armenian living under Ottoman rule was part of this uprising.
Sensible Armenians said, this is a terrible mistake. And what did the Dashnaks do? They shoot them.
The Armenian gangs were getting more violent, and by this time, they were cutting off vital supply routes and transport lines of the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire decided to relocate around 700,000 Armenians to parts of what is now Iraq and Syria. A letter by the Minister of Internal Affairs to several district governors highlights the importance the Ottoman Empire gave to the Armenians.
It is essential that the security of the Armenians being moved to be provided in full during their journey. The local population must not under any circumstances be allowed to take action against the Armenians during their journey. However, every precaution must be taken against possible attacks from the clans and villagers on the route, and any who attempt such an attack must be stopped, using force if necessary.
Archive documents reveal that there were some Ottoman officials and citizens who committed offences against Armenian convoys contrary to their orders. More than 1,000 Ottomans, including government officials, were identified and tried on charges of killing Armenians. They were held responsible for the Armenian losses and punished in 1916, some with capital punishment.
The Ottomans tried to follow the rule of law. For crimes against Armenians, they tried and many times hung the people who had done these things, including an Ottoman governor. They weren't perfect. A lot of people got away. No doubt about it. But how many Armenians or Russians who killed Turks, how many of them were ever tried and convicted? None. Not a single one.
2.5 million Anatolian Muslims died in the same period, far exceeding the number of Armenians who died during the relocation due to tribal crimes, illnesses, plague, and famine. The Armenians were being relocated in groups of 200 and had been guaranteed that they could return once the danger was over. During the relocation, Armenian gangs also killed thousands of Armenians, accusing them of betrayal. Those living in Izmir, Istanbul, and Edirne were not relocated as they did not pose a threat or were not in danger. It is believed that after the war was over, 280,000 Armenians returned to the Anatolian portion of the occupied Ottoman Empire, and a total of 700,000 Armenians emigrated to other countries.
So if you want to accuse the Ottomans of genocide or massacre or whatever you want to do, you have to take a look at these things.
And we need to be consistent. We need to be consistent. Because if we're going to say that because the Ottomans, the Turks, they were exiling Armenians, but giving them the right to return when the threat was over, if the Ottomans are going to be labelled for committing genocide, for removing the threat, telling them to go south, but you can return when the threat is over, then you need to now declare what Israel is doing in Gaza, a genocide. Because what are they doing? They're doing the same thing. We call it the death marches. The Armenians were part of a death march. What Israel is doing to the Palestinians is a death march as well. They said no food, no water, no electricity, and they were giving hospitals 2 hours to evacuate. According to the United Nations Geneva Convention, collective punishment is a war crime. Collective punishment is a war crime. If you're saying no food, no water, no electricity, you're not just saying it for Hamas, you're saying it for everyone. Right? You're saying it for everyone, including the 250 hostages of your own citizens. You're denying them of food, water, electricity. So you're even committing genocide against your own hostages. Let's see what a death march is. Under the Geneva Convention, which is a war crime, it says, let's read. A death march is a forced march of prisoners of war or other captives or deportees in which individuals are left to die along the way. It is distinguished in the way from a simple prisoner transport via foot march. Article 19 of the Geneva Convention requires that prisoners must be moved away from a danger zone, such as an advancing front line, to a place that may be considered more secure. It is not required to evacuate prisoners who are too unwell or injured to move. Listen, it is not required to evacuate prisoners or too unwell or injured to move. In times of war, such evacuations can be difficult to carry out. Death marches usually feature harsh physical labor and abuse, neglect of prisoner injury and illness, deliberate starvation, what is Israel's doing, deliberate starvation, and dehydration, no water, humiliation, torture, bombing their houses, and execution of those unable to keep up with the marching pace. Now, think about this. Israel gave a hospital, Al-Shifa hospital, 2 hours to evacuate. Here you go. You can see it on the screen. CNN.com. Israel gave Gaza hospital 2 hours to evacuate with patients. And you know what the Shifa hospital was saying? They're saying, we don't even have fuel in our ambulances. We don't even have ambulances. Like, the roads are blocked. You've bombed everything. Like, how we're supposed to move patients in 2 hours? And guess how many patients are in this hospital? More than 25,000 patients in this hospital alone. In this hospital alone, they want it moved in 2 hours. And notice, this is part of a genocide, apparently, according to the Geneva Convention. Death marches usually feature harsh physical labor and abuse, neglect of prisoner injury or illness. We're talking about people stuck in hospital. Deliberate starvation, dehydration, and execution, and unable to keep up with marching pace. So how are these people in hospital to keep up with the marching pace? And guess what? Guess what the IDF said? If you don't leave in 2 hours, it's your fault if you get bombed. How is that not torture? How is that not humiliation? So if you want to declare, if you want to say, and by the way, when they say go south, they even bomb south. They bomb south as well. They bombed a refugee camp. They actually bombed a refugee camp. Oh, there was a Hamas militant there. So there's nowhere safe now. There's nowhere safe. Nowhere safe. So you tell people to go south, but if they find a Hamas leader south, they're going to bomb those areas too. So nowhere's safe in Gaza. So why are they telling people to move south if they're saying, oh, well, we're just going to bomb it anyway because we're going to find Hamas leaders there? Where else do you expect them to go? If they say go to the beach of Gaza Beach, everyone gather at the beach. Oh, but we find a Hamas leader there, we're going to bomb the beach as well. Nowhere safe. See, when you're telling people to move south, it needs to be to a place that may be considered more secure. But nowhere is secure. Nowhere. The hospitals aren't secure. The refugee camps aren't secure. Nowhere is secure. You're not giving them an alternative, an alternative. So this is a war crime. This is now a war crime. These are the same as the death marches. If you want to say the Armenian Genocide was a war crime, you need to now get up and say what Israel is doing is a war crime. What they did against those protesters in 2018 was a war crime. But no. Only September 11 is a war crime. Only October 7 is a war crime. But 2018, killing Palestinians in Gaza, 100 of them, live ammunition, that's not a war crime. You know, telling people to go south in a death march, cutting water, food, electricity, bombing, giving a hospital 2 hours to evacuate with 25,000 patients. They're not war crimes. They're not crimes against humanity. Turning off electricity from babies in incubators in hospitals, they're not war crimes. But October 7 is a war crime. Throwing rocks at Israeli IDF soldiers, that's a crime. That's a war crime. That's a crime. They need to be shot and killed. That's a crime. Occupying the West Bank and shooting settlers there, about 100 of them who died there. There's no Hamas there. There's no rockets being fired to Israel from there. That's not a war crime. Settlers taking the homes of Palestinians, that's not a war crime. It's really disgusting.